The person I loved most in this world became a complete stranger to me for 32 years. My sister Catherine and I shared a womb, shared a childhood, shared every secret and dream, and then we shared nothing but silence and an empty space at every holiday table. People ask me how that happens, how two people who were once inseparable can go decades without speaking a single word to each other. The truth is, it happens one day at a time, one Christmas at a time, one moment of stubborn pride at a time, until suddenly 3 decades have passed, and you're sitting alone in a house full of memories, wondering if it's finally too late to say you're sorry. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I'm 78 years old now. I live in a modest 2-bedroom house in the Alamo Heights neighborhood of San Antonio, Texas. The same house my late husband Thomas and I bought back in 1975 when our boys were still small. The house feels bigger now, emptier, especially during the holidays when I look at that chair beside the Christmas tree, the one I never put away, the one that's been empty every December 25th since 1992. This is the story of how I lost my sister over words I can never take back, and how Christmas finally brought us home to each other. But before I tell you about the miracle that happened this past Christmas Eve, before I tell you about the moment I opened my front door and saw Catherine's face for the first time in over 3 decades, I need you to understand something important. This isn't just a story about forgiveness or reconciliation. This is a story about all the Christmases in between, all the years of aching silence, all the moments when I reached for the phone and couldn't make myself dial her number. This is about what pride costs us, what anger steals from us, and what love can still rebuild even when we think we've destroyed it beyond repair. And if you're listening to this right now, if you have someone in your life you haven't spoken to in months or years or decades, I want you to hear every word of what I'm about to tell you. Because I waited 32 years to fix what I broke in a single afternoon, and I'm one of the lucky ones. I got a second chance. Not everyone does. Now, before I go any further into this story, I want to ask you something. If you're finding value in what I'm sharing, if you believe in the power of real stories about real people facing real struggles, I need your help to keep this channel growing. Subscribing and hitting that notification bell takes just a second, but it means everything to helping these stories reach other people who might need to hear them. And if this story is already touching something in your heart, a quick like helps more than you might think. The algorithm rewards your support by showing this to others who need this message. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what you think so far, so drop a comment telling me what city or country you're in. Every subscription, every like, every comment helps this channel reach more people, helps build this community of listeners who believe it's never too late to make things right. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your support. It truly matters. Catherine and I were born 3 years apart in San Antonio, Texas in the mid-1940s. I came first in October of 1946, and Catherine followed in March of 1949. Our parents, James and Margaret Hayes, weren't wealthy people by any stretch of the imagination, but they were good people, hard-working people who believed in family above everything else. Daddy worked as a mechanic at a local garage on South Flores Street, and Mama took in sewing and alterations from our dining room table, her old Singer machine humming late into the night, while Catherine and I did our homework at the kitchen counter. We grew up in a small house on the west side, a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business and nobody locked their doors at night. The house had 2 bedrooms, one for our parents and one that Catherine and I shared for 18 years. We had twin beds separated by a nightstand with a small lamp that we'd leave on when we whispered to each other in the darkness, sharing our deepest secrets and biggest dreams. Looking back now, I can see that we were poor, though we never felt poor at the time. We wore hand-me-down clothes that Mama would alter to fit us properly, making sure we always looked neat and presentable, even if the fabric was worn thin in places. We ate simple meals, lots of beans and rice, chicken on Sundays if Daddy had a good week at the garage. But our house was always full of laughter and love, and that felt like the richest thing in the world. Catherine was always the artistic one, the dreamer. Even as a little girl, she'd spend hours drawing pictures of houses she wanted to live in someday, fancy places with big windows and flower gardens that looked nothing like our tiny rental with its patchy yard and chain-link fence. She'd show me her drawings with such excitement, her brown eyes sparkling as she described every detail of the imaginary rooms she'd created. I'd listen to her dreams and add my own ideas, suggesting where we could put a reading nook or a big kitchen table where the whole family could gather. I was the practical one, the planner. While Catherine dreamed about what could be, I focused on what was and how to make it better. I helped Mama with the household budget from the time I was 12, writing down every expense in a little notebook and helping her figure out how to stretch Daddy's paycheck to cover everything we needed. It wasn't a burden. I loved feeling useful, loved knowing I was helping keep our family afloat. Despite our different personalities, Catherine and I were inseparable. We walked to St. Mary's Catholic School together every morning, my hand holding hers as we crossed Broadway Street. We shared our lunch at the same cafeteria table, trading the items Mama had packed for us. I'd give her half my sandwich if she gave me her apple, little negotiations that felt terribly important at the time. We did our homework together at that kitchen counter, my math skills helping her through algebra, while her artistic talents rescued me from every art project I had to complete. On Sundays, we'd sit together in church, sharing a hymnal even though we both knew all the words by heart. After Mass, we'd walk home the long way, stopping at the corner store where Mr. Rodriguez would sometimes slip us a piece of candy if we helped him sweep the sidewalk outside his shop. Those were simple times, uncomplicated by the grudges and hurts that would come later. Our relationship as we grew older only deepened. When I was 16 and got my first real job working at Woolworths on weekends, I'd save part of my paycheck to buy Catherine little gifts, a new set of colored pencils for her drawings, a sketchbook with thick pages that wouldn't bleed through when she used markers. When she turned 13 and started her period for the first time, scared and embarrassed, I was the one who sat with her in our shared bedroom and explained everything Mama had been too shy to talk about, holding her hand and telling her it was all perfectly normal and nothing to be afraid of. We shared everything in those years: clothes, secrets, dreams, fears. When I had my first heartbreak at 17, a boy named Daniel Martinez, who chose another girl over me, Catherine stayed up all night with me, letting me cry on her shoulder and telling me I was too good for him anyway. When she struggled in her senior year of high school, worried she wasn't smart enough to get into nursing school, I spent every evening for 3 months helping her study, drilling her on biology and chemistry, until she knew the material backwards and forwards. The summer after I graduated from high school in 1964, I met Thomas Hayes at a church social. He wasn't related to us, despite sharing our last name. Just one of those coincidences that happen in a city like San Antonio, where certain surnames are as common as mesquite trees. Thomas was 21, just back from 2 years working on an oil rig in West Texas, saving money to start his own business. He was handsome in a quiet, steady way, with dark hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. More importantly, he was decent and hard-working, qualities Daddy respected above everything else. Catherine was 18 then, and I remember her being almost as excited about my courtship as I was. She'd help me pick out what to wear when Thomas came calling, lending me her nicest cardigan or her pearl earrings, costume jewelry. Nothing expensive, but they made me feel special. She'd sit on my bed and make me tell her every detail of our dates, gasping at the romantic parts and laughing at the awkward moments. When Thomas proposed to me on Christmas Eve of 1965, Catherine was the first person I told, even before I told Mama and Daddy. I ran straight to our bedroom where she was reading, and I showed her the simple gold band with its tiny diamond, and we both cried tears of joy. I married Thomas in March of 1966, a small ceremony at St. Mary's with Catherine as my maid of honor. I can still see her in her pale yellow dress, standing beside me at the altar, tears streaming down her face as I promised to love and honor Thomas for the rest of my life. At the reception in the church hall, she gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry at the same time, talking about how she was losing a roommate but gaining a brother, and how she knew Thomas would take good care of me because he'd have to answer to her if he didn't. Thomas and I moved into a tiny apartment on the south side, barely big enough for the two of us. But it was ours, and we were happy. Catherine would visit at least twice a week, often bringing dinner she'd cooked or some small household item she'd picked up that she thought we might need. We'd sit around our little kitchen table, the three of us, talking about everything and nothing, building the foundation of what I thought would be a lifetime of closeness. Catherine met Robert Miller in 1968, when she was 19 and working as a nurse's aide at Santa Rosa Hospital. Robert was a pharmacist, 7 years older than Catherine, established and stable in a way that appealed to Mama and Daddy. I wasn't as immediately taken with him as I had been with Thomas. There was something a bit reserved about Robert, a formality that felt at odds with our family's warm, open way of relating to each other. But Catherine loved him, and he clearly adored her, and who was I to question her choice when she'd been nothing but supportive of mine? They married in June of 1969, another ceremony at St. Mary's, though this one was a bit larger and more formal than mine had been. Robert's family had more money than ours, and they insisted on paying for a nicer reception. I was Catherine's matron of honor, heavily pregnant with my first son Michael, who would be born just 2 months later in August. I remember standing beside her at that altar, my hand resting on my swollen belly, thinking about how our children would grow up together, cousins who would be as close as Catherine and I had always been. And for years, that's exactly what happened. Michael was born in August of 1969, and Catherine's daughter Jennifer arrived in May of 1970. My second son David came along in February of 1972. Our children grew up together, spending weekends at each other's houses, celebrating birthdays and holidays as one extended family. Catherine and I talked on the phone nearly every day, sharing the small triumphs and challenges of raising young children. We'd meet for lunch when we could, taking the kids to Brackenridge Park, where they'd play, while we sat on benches and talked about everything from recipes to our dreams for our children's futures. Thomas started his own small construction business in 1970, and though money was tight for the first few years, we eventually bought the house in Alamo Heights in 1975. It wasn't a mansion by any stretch, a modest 2-bedroom with a small backyard, but it was ours, and it felt like we'd finally achieved something solid and permanent. Catherine and Robert had bought their own house in Terrell Hills a year earlier, a slightly larger place that Robert's income as a pharmacist had made possible. We lived only about 15 minutes apart, close enough that the kids could ride their bikes between houses once they were old enough. Those were golden years, truly. Every Sunday after church, one family or the other would host dinner. We'd take turns cooking, sharing recipes Mama had taught us, adding our own variations as we got more confident in the kitchen. The kids would play in the backyard, while the adults sat around the table, talking and laughing over coffee and dessert. Thomas and Robert got along well enough, though they were very different men. Thomas was outgoing and gregarious, always ready with a joke or a story from the construction site, while Robert was quieter, more measured in his words and opinions. Mama and Daddy would join us for these Sunday dinners whenever their health permitted. As they aged into their 60s and then 70s, Catherine and I fell naturally into a rhythm of caring for them. I'd take them to doctor's appointments on Mondays and Wednesdays, and Catherine would take them on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We'd split the cost of their medications and household expenses, neither of us keeping strict track because it didn't matter. They were our parents, and taking care of them was simply what you did. But Daddy's health began to decline seriously in the late 1980s. He'd been a smoker his whole adult life, and it finally caught up with him in the form of emphysema and a heart condition that weakened him considerably. By 1990, he could barely walk from his bedroom to the kitchen without stopping to catch his breath. Mama, who was 70 by then, struggled to care for him on her own. Catherine and I increased our involvement, but it became clear that something more needed to be done. That's when the first real crack appeared in the foundation of our relationship, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time. Catherine suggested that Mama and Daddy should sell their house and move into a nursing facility where they could get proper care. I was horrified by the suggestion. To me, putting our parents in a nursing home felt like abandonment, like we were giving up on them because they'd become inconvenient. I argued that we should move them in with one of us, that we should care for them at home the way they'd cared for us. We had a long discussion about it one Sunday afternoon in October of 1990, sitting at Catherine's kitchen table while the kids played outside and the men watched football in the living room. I remember the way Catherine's face flushed as she tried to explain her reasoning, that Mama and Daddy needed more care than we could provide, that we both had families and responsibilities, that a nursing facility would have trained staff available 24 hours a day. I didn't want to hear it. "They're our parents," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "They raised us. They sacrificed everything for us, and now you want to ship them off to some institution to die among strangers." Catherine's jaw tightened. "That's not fair, Eleanor. I love them just as much as you do. I'm thinking about what's best for them, not what makes us feel good about ourselves." The implication stung. That I was being selfish, that I was more concerned with my own feelings than with what Mama and Daddy actually needed. We didn't resolve anything that day. We agreed to table the discussion, to think about it more, but something had shifted between us, some assumption of automatic agreement that we'd always had before. In the end, Daddy made the decision for us. He told us clearly, during one of his better days in December of 1990, that he wanted to stay in his own home for as long as possible, and that when he could no longer manage that, he'd accept whatever we decided was best. Catherine and I compromised. We hired a part-time home health aide to come in during the days, and we continued our rotation of checking on them and helping with whatever they needed. Daddy died in March of 1981, in his sleep, in the bedroom he'd shared with Mama for 46 years. It was as peaceful a death as anyone could hope for, but it shattered us nonetheless. Catherine and I clung to each other at his funeral, crying in each other's arms the way we had as children when we were scared or hurt. For a few months after his death, we were as close as we'd ever been, united in our grief and in our determination to take care of Mama, who seemed to shrink into herself after losing her life partner. But Mama's health declined rapidly after Daddy died. It was as if she'd been holding on for his sake, and once he was gone, she simply didn't have the will to keep fighting. She developed pneumonia that October, spent a week in the hospital, and came out so weak she could barely stand on her own. The doctor told us plainly that she needed round-the-clock care, that leaving her alone even for a few hours wasn't safe anymore. This is when everything fell apart. The argument that destroyed my relationship with Catherine didn't happen suddenly. It built over months, layer by layer, like sediment accumulating at the bottom of a river, until it finally blocks the flow of water entirely. Looking back now with the clarity that only time and regret can provide, I can see all the warning signs, all the moments when I could have chosen a different path, spoken different words, extended more grace. But I didn't, and neither did she, and we both paid the price for our stubbornness for the next 3 decades. After Mama came home from the hospital in late October of 1991, Catherine and I had to make some immediate decisions about her care. The home health aide we'd been using during the day wasn't enough anymore. Mama needed someone there overnight too, needed help with everything from getting to the bathroom to eating her meals. The cost of full-time in-home care was astronomical, far more than either Catherine or I could afford on our own, and certainly more than Mama's modest savings and Social Security could cover. I suggested again that we move Mama in with one of us. My boys were both grown and out of the house by then. Michael had gotten married in 1990 and moved to Houston, and David was in college at UT Austin. I had a spare bedroom, and Thomas was supportive of the idea. It seemed like the obvious solution to me. But Catherine's situation was different. Jennifer was still living at home while attending community college, and Robert had recently been diagnosed with diabetes that required careful monitoring of his diet and medication schedule. Catherine said she was already overwhelmed trying to manage Robert's health issues and wasn't sure she could take on Mama's care too. She suggested again that we consider a nursing home, at least temporarily, until Mama recovered more of her strength. I couldn't accept that. To me, it still felt like giving up, like we were trying to make things easier for ourselves rather than doing what was best for Mama. I accused Catherine of caring more about her own convenience than about our mother's well-being. She accused me of being self-righteous and unrealistic, of not understanding the constraints she was dealing with in her own household. Our phone conversations, which had once been daily and pleasant, became tense and infrequent. When we did talk, we couldn't seem to discuss anything without it turning into an argument about Mama's care. I'd hang up feeling frustrated and unheard, convinced that Catherine was being selfish. I have no doubt she felt the same way about me. In December of 1991, Mama had another health crisis. She fell in her bathroom in the middle of the night, and if the home health aide hadn't been there, she might have lain on the floor until morning. The fall resulted in a broken hip that required surgery and weeks of rehabilitation. The hospital social worker told us bluntly that Mama could not return home alone, that she needed either family care or placement in a facility. Thomas and I brought Mama to our house when she was discharged from the hospital in January of 1992. It seemed like the right thing to do, the only thing to do. But I'll be honest, it was much harder than I'd anticipated. Mama needed help with almost everything. She couldn't walk without a walker, and even then could only manage a few steps before needing to rest. She needed assistance bathing, dressing, using the toilet. Her medications had to be administered on a strict schedule. She sometimes got confused, especially at night, and would wander if we didn't keep a close eye on her. I'd retired from my job teaching elementary school just 2 years earlier in 1990, thinking I'd spend my retirement years enjoying time with Thomas, maybe traveling a little, certainly having more freedom than I'd had while working. Instead, I found myself on call 24 hours a day, getting up multiple times each night when Mama called out, spending my days helping her move from the bed to the chair and back again, cooking special meals that she often didn't have the appetite to eat. Thomas was patient and kind, but I could see the strain it put on him too. We couldn't go out to dinner anymore because I didn't want to leave Mama alone. We couldn't take the trip to Colorado to see Michael and his wife that we'd been planning. Our house, which had been our peaceful retreat, felt more like a hospital ward, with medical equipment crowding the spare bedroom and pill bottles lining the bathroom counter. I called Catherine often during those months, updating her on Mama's condition, but also, I can admit now, wanting her to see how hard I was working, how much I was sacrificing. I wanted her to feel guilty for not helping more, for not offering to take shifts caring for Mama so I could have a break. I wanted her to acknowledge that I was the good daughter, the one who'd stepped up when it mattered most. Catherine would listen, make sympathetic noises, ask if there was anything she could do to help. But she didn't offer to take Mama for even a few days to give me a break. She didn't offer to come stay at my house to provide overnight care, so I could sleep through a full night. She'd send money sometimes, contributions toward Mama's medical expenses. But money wasn't what I needed. I needed her to share the physical and emotional burden of caring for our mother. The resentment grew inside me like a poisonous weed. Every time I got up in the middle of the night to help Mama to the bathroom, I thought about Catherine sleeping peacefully in her bed. Every time I canceled plans with friends because Mama was having a bad day, I thought about Catherine going about her normal life, uninterrupted by the constant demands of caregiving. Every time Mama cried because she was in pain or confused or just exhausted by her own failing body, I thought about how Catherine was missing all of this, was letting me handle it alone. I didn't share these feelings with Catherine directly. Instead, they leaked out in small comments, little barbs hidden in otherwise normal conversations. When she'd call to check on Mama, I'd make sure to mention how tired I was, how I hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks, how Thomas and I hadn't been able to go anywhere or do anything. When she'd offer money, I'd accept it, but with a tone that suggested money wasn't enough, wasn't the real support I needed. Catherine, for her part, must have been building her own case against me. She'd mention how stressed she was dealing with Robert's health issues, how Jennifer was going through a difficult breakup and needed her mother's support, how she was working extra shifts at the hospital because they were short-staffed. I heard these explanations as excuses, as her trying to justify why her life was too full to include more responsibility for Mama. By the fall of 1992, Mama's condition had stabilized somewhat. She wasn't going to get significantly better, but she wasn't actively declining either. She'd settled into a routine at our house, had her good days and bad days, but overall seemed as comfortable as she could be given her circumstances. I'd settled into the routine of caring for her too, though the exhaustion had become a permanent state, something I barely noticed anymore because I never felt any other way. Catherine called in October to say she wanted to host Thanksgiving that year. She said it had been too long since we'd all been together as a family, that she thought it would be good for Mama to have a change of scenery and see all her grandchildren in one place. I was hesitant. Traveling with Mama was complicated, required so much equipment and planning. But Thomas encouraged me to say yes, said we all needed the break from our daily routine, that it would do me good to let someone else be in charge of a meal for once. So I agreed. Thanksgiving 1992. That was the day that changed everything. The morning of Thanksgiving, Thomas and I loaded Mama into the car, along with her walker, her medications, extra clothes in case she had an accident, and all the other supplies she might need for a day away from home. The drive to Catherine's house in Terrell Hills took about 20 minutes, but it felt longer with Mama in the back seat, anxious about being away from her familiar surroundings, asking repeatedly where we were going and why. We arrived around 11 in the morning. Catherine had gone all out. Her house was beautifully decorated with fall colors, and I could smell the turkey already roasting in the oven. Robert greeted us at the door, helping Thomas get Mama inside and settled in the recliner in the living room. Jennifer was there with her new boyfriend, a young man named Marcus, who seemed nice but overwhelmed by all the family dynamics he was being thrown into. For the first couple of hours, everything seemed fine. We all made small talk, avoided any topics that might be contentious. Catherine had cooked a beautiful meal: turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, homemade rolls, 3 different pies for dessert. We gathered around her dining room table, all 7 of us, and Robert said a prayer of thanksgiving that mentioned how blessed we were to have family, to have each other, to be together on this special day. If only we'd left it at that. After dinner, while we were having pie and coffee, Mama started to get tired and a bit confused. This happened sometimes, especially later in the day. Her mind would start to wander, and she'd have trouble following conversations or remembering where she was. She asked me twice to take her home, and I kept telling her we'd leave soon. We just needed to finish dessert first. Then Mama looked across the table at Catherine and said, clear as a bell, "I never see you anymore, dear. Don't you visit me." The room went silent. Catherine's face flushed red. "Of course I visit you, Mama. I was just there last week." Mama looked confused. "Were you? I don't remember that." "She forgets sometimes," I said quickly, trying to smooth over the awkwardness. But even as I said it, I felt a small, mean part of me glad that Mama had said it, glad that Catherine had been called out for her absence. Catherine caught the edge in my tone. "What's that supposed to mean, Eleanor?" "Nothing," I said, but I couldn't leave it alone. "Just that Mama's memory isn't always reliable these days. But then you'd know that if you saw her more often." Thomas put his hand on my arm, a warning to drop it. But Catherine wasn't letting it go now either. "I see her as often as I can," Catherine said, her voice tight. "Some of us have other responsibilities too, you know. I work full-time. I have a husband with serious health issues. I have a daughter who needs me." "And I don't have responsibilities?" I shot back. "I have Mama every single day, every single night. I'm the one getting up at 2 in the morning when she needs help. I'm the one who gave up my retirement to take care of her." "Nobody forced you to do that," Catherine said. "You made that choice. Because somebody had to. Because you sure as hell weren't going to do it." The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Everyone at the table was frozen, uncomfortable, not knowing where to look. Mama started to cry, confused and upset by the raised voices. Thomas stood up and gently helped her out of her chair, guiding her to the living room away from the argument. Catherine and I stared at each other across the table. All the months of resentment, all the unspoken accusations, all the hurt and anger I'd been carrying came pouring out. "You abandoned her," I said, my voice shaking. "You abandoned both of them. When Daddy was sick, you wanted to put him in a home. When Mama needed us, you came up with every excuse in the book for why you couldn't help. You've left all the hard work to me, all the sacrifice, while you go on living your comfortable little life without any disruption." Catherine stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "How dare you? How dare you stand there and judge me like you're some kind of saint? You want to know the truth, Eleanor? You didn't take Mama in because you're so noble and self-sacrificing. You did it to prove you're the better daughter. You did it so you could hold it over my head for the rest of our lives. That's not true. Isn't it? Every phone call, every conversation, you make sure to tell me how hard it is, how tired you are, how much you're doing. You don't want my help. You want my guilt. You want me to grovel and apologize for not being as perfect as you are." "If the shoe fits," I said coldly. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. "You know what, Eleanor? Fine, you win. You're the good daughter. You're the one who sacrificed everything. I'm the selfish one who wasn't good enough. Is that what you want to hear?" "What I want," I said, standing up to face her, "is for you to actually care about our mother. What I want is for you to stop making excuses and start being a real daughter to her. What I want is for you to pull your weight for once in your life, instead of letting me do all the heavy lifting." "You're unbelievable," Catherine said, her voice breaking. "You stand there acting like you're doing this out of pure love, but all you really want is control. You want to be the hero, the martyr, the one everyone praises for being so wonderful. Well, congratulations, Eleanor. You got what you wanted. I'm out. I'm done trying to live up to your impossible standards." "Fine," I shouted. "If you're going to walk away from your own mother, then just do it. Stop pretending you care when you clearly don't." "I love Mama just as much as you do," Catherine screamed back. "But apparently that's not good enough for you unless I prove it your way, on your terms, according to your rules." Robert appeared in the doorway, his face pale. "Catherine, maybe we should—" "Stay out of this, Robert," Catherine snapped. Then she turned back to me. "You want to know what I think, Eleanor? I think you're bitter. I think you're angry that your life didn't turn out the way you planned, and you're taking it out on me. I think you resent that I have a good marriage and a good job and a life that doesn't revolve entirely around caring for someone else. And I think you've convinced yourself that you're noble and I'm selfish so you can feel superior." Her words hit me like physical blows. "How dare you psychoanalyze me? You don't know anything about my life or my marriage or why I made the choices I made." "Don't I? You've been broadcasting your martyrdom for months, Eleanor. Poor you, giving up everything to take care of Mama. Poor you, so tired and so burdened while your selfish sister lives her easy life. If that's what you think of me, I said, my voice going cold and quiet in that way it does when I'm truly furious, then maybe you're right. Maybe we shouldn't try to pretend anymore. Maybe you should just go on with your life, and I'll go on with mine, and we can both stop wasting each other's time. Maybe we should, Catherine said, grabbing her purse from the counter. Come on, Robert, we're leaving. Catherine, Robert started to protest. I said we're leaving. She stormed toward the front door. Jennifer appeared from somewhere in the house, looking scared and confused. Mom, what's happening? We're going home, Catherine said. Say goodbye to your grandmother. I stood in the dining room watching through the doorway as Catherine gathered her coat. Thomas came in from the living room where he'd been sitting with Mama, his expression worried. Eleanor, he said quietly, maybe you should... Don't, I said, just don't. Catherine paused at the door, turned back to look at me one last time. For a moment I thought she might apologize, might take back some of what she'd said. For a moment I thought I might do the same. Instead she said, you know what the saddest part is, Eleanor? I used to look up to you. I used to think you were the smartest, kindest, most wonderful person in the world. I wanted to be like you. But now I see what you really are. Someone who keeps score, who holds grudges, who can't accept that people have different ways of showing love. I feel sorry for you. And then she was gone, the door closing behind her and Robert with a finality that echoed through the house. I stood there shaking, Thomas's hand on my shoulder, Jennifer crying softly somewhere behind me, and Mama calling out from the living room, asking what all the shouting had been about. That was the last time I saw my sister for 32 years. The days and weeks after that Thanksgiving passed in a blur of numbness and anger. I replayed the argument in my head constantly, sometimes casting myself as the wronged party, sometimes acknowledging my own role in the blow-up, but always coming back to the same conclusion. Catherine had abandoned Mama, and I had only spoken the truth, however painful it might have been to hear. Thomas tried to get me to call Catherine and apologize, to at least try to mend the rift before it hardened into something permanent. You're both hurting, he said one night as we lay in bed, Mama's soft snoring audible through the wall from the next room. You're both exhausted and stressed, and you both said things you didn't mean, but she's your sister, Eleanor. You've been close your whole lives. Don't let one argument destroy that. But pride is a terrible thing. It builds walls brick by brick, each day of silence adding another layer of protection around your wounded heart. I told myself I'd be willing to reconcile if Catherine made the first move, if she apologized for what she'd said. I convinced myself that I'd been right to call her out, that sometimes truth hurts but needs to be spoken anyway. I decided that if she truly cared about healing our relationship, she'd reach out. She didn't reach out. I found out later that she was thinking the exact same thing about me, waiting for me to make the first move, to apologize for what I'd said. We were both sitting on opposite sides of the same wall, each convinced that the other one had built it. Christmas of 1992 came and went without any contact between us. I set up our Christmas tree in the living room the way I always did, but for the first time in my adult life, I didn't call Catherine to coordinate whose house we'd celebrate at. I didn't buy presents for her or Robert or Jennifer. When Michael called from Houston to ask what was going on, why Aunt Catherine wasn't coming for Christmas, I gave him a brief, sanitized version of events that made it sound like a simple disagreement that had gotten out of hand. That first Christmas without Catherine was strange and hollow. Thomas and I took Mama to church for Christmas Eve Mass, and I found myself scanning the crowd for Catherine's face, even though I knew she attended a different parish. We opened presents on Christmas morning, just the three of us since the boys had made plans with their in-laws, and I couldn't help but notice the empty chair beside the tree, the one where Catherine always sat with her coffee, exclaiming over every gift anyone opened. Mama asked about Catherine several times that day. Her memory was fading more rapidly by then, and she didn't remember the Thanksgiving argument at all. Each time she asked, I'd make some vague excuse about Catherine being busy with her own family, and then I'd quickly change the subject. I told myself I was protecting Mama from the pain of knowing her daughters weren't speaking, but the truth is, I was protecting myself from having to acknowledge the emptiness Catherine's absence created. The months turned into years with startling speed. Mama's health continued its slow decline. She developed dementia that gradually robbed her of more and more memories, more and more of herself. By 1994, she sometimes didn't recognize me, called me by her sister's name, or thought I was one of her childhood friends. By 1995, she needed constant supervision and care. By 1996, she couldn't walk at all, couldn't feed herself, couldn't control her bodily functions. Through all of this, I never called Catherine to update her, never reached out to tell her that Mama was slipping away piece by piece. I told myself it was because Catherine had made it clear she didn't want the burden of Mama's care. So why would she want the burden of knowing how bad things were getting? But really, I think I was punishing her, holding on to my anger as a shield against the crushing loneliness and exhaustion of those years. I found out later that Catherine had called Thomas several times during those years, asking about Mama, asking about me. Thomas, trying to be loyal to me but also caring about Catherine, would give her brief updates on Mama's condition, but would tell her that I wasn't ready to talk yet. Catherine would thank him, ask him to tell me she was thinking of us, and then hang up. She never pushed harder than that, never showed up at the house unannounced, never forced the issue. Looking back now, I wonder what would have happened if either of us had been brave enough to break the silence. What if Catherine had shown up at my door one day and demanded that we talk? What if I had picked up the phone and called her, swallowed my pride, and admitted that I needed her help, her support, her presence? How many precious years could we have reclaimed if either of us had been willing to be vulnerable? But we didn't. We let the silence grow, let the years accumulate, let the distance between us become so vast that eventually it seemed impossible to cross. Mama died in February of 1997, 5 years after that terrible Thanksgiving. It was pneumonia again that took her in the end, her weakened body simply unable to fight anymore. I was holding her hand when she passed, sitting beside her hospital bed at 3 a.m, watching her breathing become shallower and more labored until finally it simply stopped. Thomas had gone home to get a few hours of sleep, so I was alone when she died, alone with the woman who'd given me life, who'd raised me and loved me and taught me everything she knew about being a woman, a wife, a mother. The nurse asked me if there was anyone I wanted to call, any family who should be notified. I thought about Catherine then, wondered if I should call her, if she'd want to know that Mama had passed. But I was so angry with her in that moment, angry that she hadn't been there helping me through these terrible years, angry that I'd carried this burden alone, angry that even now, in this moment of Mama's death, I was alone, so I didn't call her. I called the funeral home instead, made the arrangements, picked out the casket and the flowers and the prayers for the service. I called Michael and David, my sons, who immediately booked flights to come home. I called a few of Mama's old friends from church, but I didn't call Catherine. Thomas did. He told me later that he'd called her the next morning, after I'd finally come home from the hospital and collapsed into bed from sheer exhaustion. He told her that Mama had passed, gave her the details about the funeral. Catherine had cried on the phone, he said, had asked about me, had asked if she should come to the funeral. "What did you tell her?" I asked him. "I told her it was her decision," Thomas said. "I told her that you were grieving and exhausted, and I didn't know how you'd react to seeing her. But I also told her that she was Mama's daughter, and she had every right to attend her own mother's funeral." Catherine came to the funeral, I saw her standing at the back of St. Mary's during the service, Robert beside her, both of them in black. She looked older than I remembered, more lines around her eyes, gray starting to show in her dark hair. Our eyes met across the church for just a moment, and I saw the pain there, the grief not just for Mama, but for everything we'd lost. After the service, people gathered in the church hall for the reception. I stood near the entrance, accepting condolences from people I barely remembered, Mama's old friends and neighbors who'd known her when she was young and vibrant and full of life. I kept watching the door, waiting to see if Catherine would come to the reception, wondering what I'd say to her if she did. She didn't come. I found out later from Thomas that she'd approached him in the parking lot, asked him to give me her condolences, and then left. She'd been too afraid of causing a scene, too uncertain of her welcome, too hurt by years of silence to risk another confrontation on the day we buried our mother. I told myself I was relieved that she hadn't come, that it would have been too awkward, too painful. But when I got home that night and finally allowed myself to cry, really cry, not just the composed tears I'd managed at the funeral, but deep, wrenching sobs that shook my whole body, I cried for more than just Mama. I cried for Catherine, too, for the sister I'd lost, for the relationship that had once been the most important one in my life. But even then, even in the depths of that grief, I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't reach out. I told myself it was too late. Too much time had passed. Too much hurt had accumulated. I told myself that some things, once broken, can't be fixed. The years after Mama's death passed in a strange sort of fog. I had been a caregiver for so long that I didn't know how to be anything else. The house felt too quiet, too empty, even with Thomas there. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, that ingrained habit from years of checking on Mama, and have to remind myself that there was no one to check on anymore, no one who needed me in quite that way. I tried to fill my days with activities. I volunteered at the library, joined a book club, took up gardening with more seriousness than I'd ever given it before. Thomas and I finally took that trip to Colorado in 1998, visited Michael and his wife, met our first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl named Emma. We traveled to Austin to see David, who'd graduated from college and started working for a tech company. Life went on as life does, whether you're ready for it or not. But there was always an empty space, a Catherine-shaped hole in my life that nothing else could fill. I'd see something funny and think, I should tell Catherine about this, before remembering that we didn't talk anymore. I'd go to call her phone number, which I still had memorized after all these years, before stopping myself. I'd drive past Terrell Hills sometimes and wonder if she still lived there, if she was happy, if she ever thought about me. I heard about her occasionally through the grapevine, mutual friends from church who stayed in contact with both of us and didn't quite understand why we'd stopped speaking. I learned that Jennifer had gotten married in 1999, and I felt a pang of sadness that I hadn't been invited to the wedding, hadn't been there to see my niece walk down the aisle. I heard that Robert's diabetes had gotten worse, that he'd had to retire early. I heard that Catherine had become a grandmother in 2002, a little boy named Matthew. Every Christmas, I'd set up that same chair beside the tree. It became a sort of ritual, a way of acknowledging the absence even if I couldn't bring myself to fix it. Thomas would ask me every year why I kept putting out that chair when no one was going to sit in it, and I never had a good answer for him. It just felt important somehow, felt like the one small way I could admit, even if only to myself, that something was missing. In 2009, Thomas died. It was sudden, a massive heart attack while he was working in the yard one Saturday afternoon in May. He'd been healthy, active, no warning signs at all. One minute he was trimming the hedges, and the next he was on the ground, and no amount of CPR from me or the paramedics could bring him back. I was devastated. Thomas had been my partner for 43 years, my rock through every storm, the steady presence that held me together when I was falling apart. Losing him felt like losing a part of myself, like someone had reached into my chest and torn out something vital that I needed to survive. The boys came immediately, of course, along with their wives and children. The house filled with family, with people bringing food and offering condolences and sharing memories of Thomas. And in the middle of all that chaos and grief, I found myself looking for Catherine, expecting her to walk through the door the way she would have before, the way she'd done for every major event in our lives before that terrible Thanksgiving 17 years earlier. She didn't come. She sent flowers to the funeral, a beautiful arrangement with a card that simply said, "With deepest sympathy, Catherine, Robert, and Jennifer." Seeing her handwriting after all those years made something crack open in my chest. I kept the card, tucked it into my jewelry box where I still have it today. After Thomas died, the loneliness became overwhelming. For the first time in my adult life, I lived completely alone. No husband, no children at home, no mother to care for. Just me in this house that suddenly felt enormous and empty, rattling around with my memories and my regrets. I thought about calling Catherine many times during those dark months after Thomas's death. I even picked up the phone a few times, dialed the first few digits of her number. But I never completed the call. What would I say after 17 years of silence? How would I even begin to bridge that gap? And what if she rejected me? What if she told me it was too late? What if she hung up on me? I couldn't bear the thought of one more loss, one more rejection, one more door closing in my face. So I didn't call. I suffered through my grief alone, leaning on my sons and my friends, but never quite letting anyone see the full extent of my pain. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Martinez, who encouraged me to talk about everything I'd lost, not just Thomas, but Mama and Daddy, and the sister I hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 decades. "Have you considered reaching out to her?" Dr. Martinez asked me during one session in late 2009. "It's been too long," I said. "She probably doesn't even think about me anymore." "Do you think about her?" "All the time." "Then what makes you think she doesn't think about you too?" I didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, I had too many answers, all of them rooted in fear. Fear of rejection, fear of having to admit I'd been wrong, fear of being vulnerable, fear of opening myself up to more hurt. The years continued to pass. 2010, 2011, 2012, 20 years since the argument, then 25 years. The number became almost abstract, hard to comprehend. How could it have been that long? How had I let so much time slip away? I became closer with my grandchildren during those years. Emma, Michael's daughter, was in middle school by then, a bright and energetic girl who loved to come visit her grandma in San Antonio. David had 2 children by then too, a boy and a girl. They'd video call me, tell me about their school activities and their friends. Their presence in my life was a joy, a reminder that life goes on, that there's always something to live for. But there was always that ache, that awareness of what was missing. I'd watch Emma and think about how she'd never know her great Aunt Catherine, never know the woman who used to be my best friend, my confidant, my sister in every sense of the word. I'd think about how Catherine had grandchildren too, children I'd never met, would probably never meet. In 2015, I turned 69, 23 years since the argument. I was starting to feel my age by then. Arthritis in my hands, my knees not what they used to be, having to use reading glasses for everything. I couldn't help but think about Mama, about how she'd been 70 when Daddy died, how quickly her health had declined after that. I couldn't help but wonder how many good years I had left, how much time I was wasting in stubborn silence. I drafted a letter to Catherine that year, sat down at my computer and typed out everything I wanted to say. How sorry I was, how much I missed her, how I thought about her every single day. I printed it out, put it in an envelope, addressed it to her old address in Terrell Hills, even though I wasn't sure if she still lived there. I put a stamp on it and carried it around in my purse for 2 weeks. I never mailed it. Every time I walked past a mailbox, I'd take the letter out, hold it in my hands, and then put it back in my purse. What if she didn't want to hear from me? What if the letter made things worse somehow? What if she'd moved and some stranger read this deeply personal outpouring of my regrets? Eventually, the letter got creased and worn from being carried around. I took it out of my purse and put it in a drawer in my desk, where it still sits today, along with 2 other letters I wrote and never sent in 2017 and 2019. The loneliness of those years is hard to describe. I had friends, I had my sons and their families, I had activities and hobbies and things to fill my days. But there was always something missing, always this awareness that the person who'd known me longest and best, the person who'd shared my childhood and understood my history, was out there somewhere living her life without me in it. Sometimes I'd dream about Catherine. We'd be young again, children in our shared bedroom, whispering to each other in the darkness. Or we'd be teenagers, walking home from school together, laughing about something one of the nuns had said. Or we'd be young mothers, sitting in a park watching our children play, talking about everything and nothing. I'd wake from those dreams with tears on my face, aching for something I'd thrown away in a moment of anger and pride. Every Christmas, I'd set up that chair. Every Christmas, I'd look at it and think, maybe this year. Every Christmas, I'd go to bed on Christmas night with that chair still empty, another year of silence added to the tally. And then came 2024, 32 years since the argument. I was 78 years old. Catherine was 75. We'd lived the majority of our adult lives estranged from each other, all because of one terrible argument, all because neither of us could find the courage to be the first one to break the silence. November of 2024 started like any other month. I'd settled into a routine over the years. Monday mornings, I'd go to the grocery store. Tuesday afternoons, I'd volunteer at the library. Wednesdays, I'd have lunch with a group of women from church. Thursdays, I'd video call with Emma and her siblings. My life was peaceful, predictable, manageable, empty in ways I'd learned to live with. The first week of November, I pulled out my Christmas decorations from the storage shed in the backyard. I'd always been someone who liked to get an early start on the holidays, and now that I was older and it took me longer to do physical tasks, starting early was more necessity than preference. I spent several days going through boxes, deciding what to keep and what to finally donate, washing the ornaments that had gotten dusty over the year, checking that all the lights still worked. The Tuesday after Election Day, November 12th. I remember the date exactly. I was in the living room untangling a strand of Christmas lights when I heard the mail truck stop in front of my house. I didn't think much of it. Mail came every day, usually just bills and advertisements. Nothing exciting. But something made me get up and walk to the mailbox right then, instead of waiting until later like I usually did. There were 3 pieces of mail, an electric bill, a catalog from a garden supply company, and a cream-colored envelope with my name and address written in handwriting I would have recognized anywhere, even after 32 years of not seeing it. Catherine's handwriting. I stood there on my driveway, holding that envelope, my hands starting to shake. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked at the return address, an address in Austin, so she'd moved at some point from Terrell Hills. I looked at the postmark, November 10th, just 2 days ago. I ran my finger over my name written in her careful script, the way she always made the E in Eleanor with that distinctive loop. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that my neighbor Mrs. Patterson called over from her yard, asking if I was all right. I managed to wave at her to say something about being fine, and then I walked back into my house on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. I sat down at the kitchen table, the envelope in front of me. I stared at it for a long time, afraid to open it, afraid of what it might say. What if it was bad news? What if she was writing to tell me she was sick, dying, that I'd wasted all these years, and now it was too late? What if it was angry, a final listing of my sins and shortcomings, before cutting me out of her life officially and permanently. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely tear open the envelope. Inside was a card, a simple watercolor painting of a Texas blue bonnet field on the front. Inside, in Catherine's handwriting, "Dear Eleanor, I've started this letter 100 times over the years and never had the courage to finish it, let alone send it. But I'm 75 years old now, and I've decided I can't afford to waste whatever time I have left being a coward. 32 years is a long time to be angry. It's a long time to be proud. It's a long time to miss your sister. I don't know if you'll even read this letter. I don't know if you'll throw it away or if you've moved and this will never reach you. But I had to try. I'm sorry, Eleanor. I'm sorry for the things I said at Thanksgiving in 1992. I'm sorry for not being there to help you take care of Mama. I'm sorry for not coming to talk to you at Mama's funeral. I'm sorry for not reaching out when Thomas died. I'm sorry for 32 years of stubborn silence. I know I can't undo the past. I know I hurt you, and you hurt me, and we both said things we can't take back. But I also know that you're my sister, and I love you, and I always have, even when I was too angry to admit it. I'm not asking you to forget everything that happened. I'm not even necessarily asking you to forgive me, though I hope someday you might. I'm just asking if you'd be willing to see me, to talk, to try. If you are, I'd like to come visit you for Christmas. I'll understand completely if you say no. I'll understand if you don't even respond to this letter. But if there's any part of you that's missed me the way I've missed you, if there's any chance we could find our way back to each other, I'd like to try. Please think about it. With love, no matter what you decide, Catherine." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face so hard I could barely see the words. My sister had reached out. After all these years, after all this time, she'd been brave enough to break the silence. I cried for a long time, sitting at that kitchen table, the letter clutched in my hands. I cried for all the wasted years, all the Christmases we'd spent apart, all the moments of joy and sorrow we hadn't shared. I cried for Mama, who died thinking her daughters couldn't find their way back to each other. I cried for Thomas, who'd begged me to reconcile and died before it happened. I cried for Catherine and for myself, for 2 stubborn old women who'd let pride rob them of something precious. But underneath the tears, underneath the grief for all we'd lost, there was something else. Hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe it wasn't too late, maybe we could still fix this, maybe there was still time. I wanted to call her immediately, to pick up the phone and tell her, yes, please come for Christmas, please come tomorrow, please come right now because I've missed you so much I can barely stand it. But my hands were shaking too badly to dial, and my voice was too choked with tears to speak coherently, and I needed time to process this, to think about what I wanted to say. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I got down on my knees beside my bed, not easy at 78 with bad knees, and I prayed. I prayed for guidance, for courage, for the right words to say. I prayed for Catherine, for her health and happiness. I prayed for forgiveness for my own stubbornness and pride. And I prayed for a second chance, for the miracle of being able to hold my sister again. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Catherine's letter, reading it over and over by the light of my bedside lamp. I thought about all the things I wanted to say to her, all the apologies I owed her, all the stories I wanted to share about the last 32 years of my life. I thought about what it would be like to see her face again, to hear her voice, to maybe, if she'd let me, hold her hand the way we used to when we were children walking to school. The next morning, I sat down at my computer and started typing. Unlike the letters I'd written before and never sent, this one came easily, the words flowing out of me like they'd been waiting all these years to be released. Dear Catherine, I can't remember the last time I cried as hard as I cried reading your letter. I've read it so many times since yesterday that I've nearly memorized every word. Yes, I want to see you. Yes, I want to talk. Yes, please come for Christmas. Please come as soon as you can. and stay as long as you're willing. I'm sorry too, Catherine. I'm so sorry for all of it, for the things I said, for the years I let pass without reaching out, for being too proud and too stubborn to be the first one to break the silence. I'm sorry for missing 32 years of your life. I'm sorry for not being there when you became a grandmother. I'm sorry for everything, you're right. We can't undo the past. But maybe we can still salvage the future. Maybe we can still have whatever years we have left as sisters instead of strangers. I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was too angry to say it, even when I was too hurt to admit it. You're my sister, and nothing that happened could ever change that. Come for Christmas. Come early if you can. We have 32 years of catching up to do, and I don't want to waste another single day. With all my love, Eleanor. I printed the letter, put it in an envelope, addressed it to Catherine in Austin, and drove immediately to the post office to mail it. I didn't let myself hesitate this time. Didn't let myself second guess or worry about what might go wrong. I walked up to the mailbox and dropped the letter in, and felt something like a weight lift off my shoulders as I did. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. Every day I'd check the mail, hoping for a response, trying not to panic when there wasn't one. What if she'd changed her mind? What if my letter got lost? What if she'd only offered to come for Christmas to be polite and was now regretting it? On November 27th, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but the area code was 5112, Austin. My heart started racing as I answered. Hello? Eleanor? 32 years. 32 years since I'd heard Catherine's voice. It was older now, a little rougher, but unmistakably hers. Hearing it made me cry all over again. Catherine, I managed to say through my tears. Oh, Catherine. I got your letter, she said, and I could hear that she was crying too. I've been trying to work up the courage to call for 3 days. We talked for 2 hours that day. Carefully at first, both of us so afraid of saying the wrong thing, of somehow ruining this fragile reconnection before it had a chance to solidify. We talked about logistics. She'd drive down on Christmas Eve morning, arrive by lunchtime. Robert had passed away 3 years ago, so it would just be her. Jennifer and her family lived in Dallas now, and they'd be having their own Christmas celebration, so Catherine would be alone anyway. We didn't talk about the argument that day, didn't rehash the painful past. There would be time for that later. For now, we just talked about surface things, testing the waters, remembering how to be sisters to each other. Before we hung up, Catherine said softly, I've missed you, Eleanor. So much. I've missed you too, I said. Every single day. After we said goodbye, I sat in my living room and looked at that empty chair beside the Christmas tree. In 3 weeks, Catherine would sit in that chair. In 3 weeks, it wouldn't be empty anymore. I spent the next few weeks preparing for Christmas with more care and attention than I'd given anything in years. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing floors and washing windows until everything gleamed. I went shopping and bought food for a proper Christmas dinner, turkey and all the trimmings, the kind of meal we used to share when we were younger. I bought new sheets for the guest bedroom and put fresh flowers in a vase on the nightstand. I decorated the house more elaborately than I had in years. Not just the tree, but wreaths and garlands and candles. I wanted it to be perfect. Wanted Catherine to walk in and see that I'd been preparing for her, waiting for her, hoping for this. Michael called a few days before Christmas, asking about my plans. When I told him Catherine was coming, there was a long silence on the phone. Aunt Catherine, he finally said. But you guys haven't. I mean, it's been 32 years, I said. I know. But she wrote to me, and I wrote back, and she's coming for Christmas. Mom, that's wonderful, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so happy for you, for both of you. Emma called that same day. Michael must have told her. Grandma, I can't believe it. Are you nervous? Terrified, I admitted, but in a good way, in an excited way. "I'm so glad you're getting your sister back," Emma said. "Everyone should have family at Christmas." The night before Christmas Eve, I barely slept. I kept running through scenarios in my head, imagining how it would go. Would we hug immediately? Would it be awkward at first? What would we talk about? What if the reality couldn't live up to 32 years of missing each other? Christmas Eve morning, I was up at 5, too nervous to sleep. I made coffee, straightened things that were already straight, looked out the window every few minutes as if Catherine might arrive hours early. I changed my outfit 3 times, trying to find something that looked nice, but not like I was trying too hard. She'd said she'd arrive around lunchtime. At 11 o'clock, I started watching the window constantly. At 11:30, I was pacing back and forth in the living room. At 11:45, a car pulled into my driveway. My heart felt like it might beat out of my chest. I watched through the window as Catherine got out of her car, a silver sedan I didn't recognize. She looked older, of course. Her hair was completely gray now, cut shorter than she used to wear it. She moved a bit stiffly, like her joints hurt the way mine did. She was wearing a simple blue dress and a cardigan, and she stood by her car for a moment looking at the house, gathering her courage the same way I was gathering mine. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. Catherine turned at the sound, and our eyes met across the 30 feet of driveway and yard that separated us. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just looked at each other, really looked, seeing the changes 3 decades had made, seeing the familiar features underneath the years and gray hair and wrinkles. Then Catherine smiled, a tentative, trembling smile that was so achingly familiar it made my breath catch. And suddenly, I was moving, walking across the yard, faster than I'd moved in years, and she was moving too. And then we were in each other's arms, holding on so tightly I thought we might never let go. We stood there crying in my front yard, 2 old women who'd wasted 32 years being apart, who'd let pride and anger steal what should have been 3 decades of shared joys and sorrows, of being there for each other the way sisters should be. "I'm so sorry," Catherine kept saying against my shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "Me too," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry too, for everything." We must have stood there for 5 minutes, just holding each other, crying, not caring what the neighbors might think. Finally, Catherine pulled back just enough to look at my face, her hands on my shoulders. "You look exactly the same," she said, which was a ridiculous lie since we both looked dramatically older, but I understood what she meant. Underneath everything, I was still the sister she remembered. "So do you," I said, and meant it in the same way. "Can we go inside?" Catherine asked. "I'm shaking so hard I can barely stand." I laughed through my tears. "Me too. Come on." I led her into the house, the same house I'd lived in for nearly 50 years, the house she'd visited 1,000 times when we were younger but hadn't set foot in since that terrible Thanksgiving in 1992. She looked around, taking in the changes, new furniture, different paint colors, photos of my grandchildren she'd never met. "It's exactly how I remembered it," she said softly, "and completely different at the same time." 32 years will do that, I said. We stood in the living room and I could feel the weight of all those years between us, all the things we needed to say, all the hurt that needed to be acknowledged and hopefully healed. But I didn't know how to start, where to begin unpacking 3 decades of silence. Catherine saw my struggle. She reached out and took my hand. Her hand was wrinkled and spotted with age now, just like mine, but her grip was still strong. "Can we just sit?" she asked. "Just sit and talk like we used to?" "I'd like that," I said. We sat on the couch, still holding hands, and for a long moment neither of us said anything. Then Catherine took a deep breath and started talking. "I want to tell you about my life," she said. "All the parts you missed, and I want to hear about yours." But first I need to tell you how sorry I am. Not just for the argument, but for being too proud to call you after, for not coming to you at Mama's funeral, for not being there when Thomas died, for wasting all these years we could have had together. I'm just as guilty, I said. I could have called too. I should have called. I was so angry and hurt, and then enough time passed that I didn't know how to fix it anymore. Me too, Catherine said. Every year it got harder to imagine reaching out. Every year the distance got bigger until it seemed impossible to cross. But you did cross it, I said. You wrote that letter. You were braver than I was. Catherine shook her head. I don't think it's about who was braver. I think we were both just waiting for the right moment, and mine happened to come first. We talked for hours that afternoon, sitting on that couch with our hands clasped together. Catherine told me about the last 32 years of her life, about Robert's declining health and his death 3 years ago from complications of diabetes, about Jennifer's marriage and divorce, and eventual remarriage to a good man named Marcus, a different Marcus than the boyfriend at that Thanksgiving, about her 2 grandchildren, Matthew and Sophie, who she clearly adored. She told me about retiring from nursing at 65 and spending her retirement years volunteering at a free clinic in Austin. She told me about her move from Terrell Hills to Austin 15 years ago, wanting a fresh start after Robert's retirement. I told her about my life too, about the years caring for Mama until she died, about Thomas's sudden death and the grief that had nearly destroyed me, about my boys and their families, about my grandchildren who I'd gotten to watch grow up. I told her about the therapy I'd done after Thomas died, about learning to live alone, about the volunteer work I did at the library, and how it gave my life purpose. We talked about Mama and Daddy, sharing memories we hadn't spoken aloud in decades. We laughed about things we used to do as children, stories we'd both forgotten until the other one brought them up. We cried about the time we'd lost, the moments we should have shared. Catherine hadn't been there when Michael and David got married. I hadn't been there for Jennifer's weddings or when Catherine's grandchildren were born. Do you remember, Catherine said at one point, how we used to whisper to each other in the dark when we were children? In that bedroom we shared? Every night, I said, smiling at the memory. We'd tell each other our secrets and our dreams. I've missed having someone to whisper my secrets to, Catherine said softly. Me too, I said. As the afternoon wore on, we eventually had to talk about the elephant in the room, the argument itself, the terrible things we'd said to each other, the real grievances that had driven us apart. I need you to know, Catherine said, that I did love Mama. I did care about her. But you were right. I wasn't there the way you were. I let you carry the burden alone, and that wasn't fair. And I need you to know, I said, that you were right too. Part of why I took Mama in was to prove I was the better daughter. I did hold it over your head. I did resent you for having a life that wasn't consumed by caregiving. We were both right and both wrong, Catherine said. We both let our worst selves show up that day. Do you think, I asked tentatively, that we can forgive each other? Really forgive. Not just say the words, but actually let go of the hurt. Catherine was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said, I think forgiveness is a process, not a moment. I think we'll have to choose it over and over again. But yes, I think we can. I think we already have, at least started to. As evening approached, I started preparing dinner, the Christmas Eve meal I'd planned so carefully. Catherine joined me in the kitchen, and it was like stepping back in time, the two of us working side by side the way we had 1,000 times before. She'd peel potatoes while I seasoned the turkey. I'd chop vegetables while she stirred the gravy. We moved around each other with a familiarity that 32 years hadn't erased, our bodies still remembering the rhythm of cooking together. We ate dinner at my small dining room table, and for the first time in decades, I said a blessing that included heartfelt gratitude for family, for second chances, for the miracle of reconciliation. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as I prayed, and when I finished, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Amen." After dinner, we sat in the living room by the Christmas tree, the lights twinkling in the darkness. Catherine looked at the chair beside the tree, the empty chair I'd kept there for 32 years. "Is this?" she started to ask. "It's been here every Christmas," I told her, "waiting for you." Catherine started crying again. "All these years you kept a place for me." "Always," I said. "Even when I was angry, even when I thought I'd never see you again, I couldn't imagine Christmas without that chair, without the hope that maybe someday you'd sit in it again." Catherine moved to that chair and sat down, running her hands over the armrests. "I'm here now," she said. "I'm finally here." We sat there in the quiet. The only sound, the soft crackling of the artificial fireplace and the gentle hum of the Christmas tree lights. After a while, Catherine said, "Do you remember the Christmas when we were 12 and 9, and we snuck downstairs in the middle of the night to peek at our presents?" I laughed. "And Daddy caught us and pretended to be Santa checking to make sure we were being good." "We were so scared," Catherine said, giggling in a way that made her sound young again, until he started laughing and told us we'd better get back to bed before the real Santa saw us. We spent the rest of the evening trading memories, filling in the gaps of our lost years, building a bridge across the divide that had separated us for so long. When it got late, I showed Catherine to the guest bedroom, the room that had once belonged to my boys, now redecorated as a proper guest space with soft bedding and fresh flowers. "Stay as long as you want," I told her at the bedroom door. "A few days, a week, forever, I don't care. I just don't want you to leave." "I'll stay through New Year's if that's all right," Catherine said. "I want to make up for lost time." "That's more than all right," I said. "That's perfect." We hugged goodnight, holding on for a long moment, still not quite able to believe this was real, that we'd actually found our way back to each other. That night, lying in my bed in the darkness, I thought about all the Christmases I'd spent looking at that empty chair, all the years I'd grieved for my sister while she was still alive. I thought about how close we'd come to never reconciling, to dying as strangers, to wasting our entire lives on pride and stubbornness. And I thought about tomorrow, Christmas morning, when I'd wake up and Catherine would be here, when that chair would finally be filled, when we'd have the chance to create new memories to add to the old ones. Christmas morning, I woke early, just like I always did, but this time with a sense of excitement and joy I hadn't felt in years. Catherine was here. My sister was actually here, sleeping in the guest bedroom down the hall. I made coffee and started preparing breakfast, pancakes and bacon, the kind of meal we used to have on special occasions when we were children. Around 7:30, I heard Catherine's bedroom door open, heard her footsteps in the hallway. "Merry Christmas," she said, appearing in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, her gray hair mussed from sleep. "Merry Christmas," I said. And then we were hugging again, because we couldn't seem to stop hugging, couldn't seem to get enough of just being physically close to each other after so much time apart. We ate breakfast at the kitchen table, talking about our plans for the day. Michael had called the night before to wish me Merry Christmas and to say how happy he was that Catherine and I had reconciled. He'd asked if he could talk to her, and their conversation had lasted half an hour. Michael telling her about his life and his family. Catherine crying happy tears that she got to talk to her nephew again. After breakfast, we opened presents. I'd bought Catherine a few things, simple gifts, nothing extravagant, just tokens to show I'd been thinking about her. A warm scarf in her favorite color blue, which I remembered even after all these years. A photo album I'd put together with pictures from our childhood and youth, copies I'd made from my own albums. A journal with a beautiful leather cover, for her to record her thoughts and memories. Catherine cried over each gift, especially the photo album. She'd brought gifts for me too, a beautiful piece of jewelry, a new gardening book since she remembered I liked to garden, and a framed picture of herself with her daughter and grandchildren, so I could see the family I'd missed getting to know. But the best gift was the one she gave me last, a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with 2 charms, 2 interlocked hearts, and a small charm that said, "Sisters." "I saw this months ago," Catherine said as I looked at it with tear-filled eyes. "Before I even had the courage to write the letter. I bought it thinking maybe someday, if I ever got brave enough, if you ever forgave me, I could give it to you." I put the bracelet on immediately, and I haven't taken it off since. We spent the rest of Christmas Day doing simple things, watching old movies, cooking dinner together, calling my boys and her daughter on video chat so our families could connect after all these years. Jennifer was skeptical at first. Catherine had told me she'd been angry on her mother's behalf for years, angry at me for the things I'd said that Thanksgiving. But as we talked, as she saw how happy her mother was, how much Catherine and I had missed each other, she softened. "I'm glad you're back in Mom's life," Jennifer said before we ended the call. "She's talked about you for years, missed you even when she pretended she didn't. I'm glad she doesn't have to miss you anymore." Over the next week, Catherine and I fell into an easy rhythm. We'd have breakfast together, then maybe go for a walk if the weather was nice, careful with our old knees and slow pace. We'd spend afternoons sitting in the living room, talking, going through old photo albums, calling people to spread the news that the Hayes sisters were speaking again. We'd cook dinner together, watch the sunset from the back porch, stay up late talking the way we used to when we were children. We talked about everything during that week. We talked about our marriages, the good parts, and the struggles. Catherine told me how Robert had become distant in his later years, how they'd stayed together but had drifted apart emotionally. I told her about the deep loneliness after Thomas died, how I'd had to learn to be a person on my own instead of half of a couple. We talked about our children, comparing notes on motherhood, laughing about the similar challenges we'd faced, the parallel experiences of raising kids. We talked about our regrets, not just about each other, but about our lives in general, the paths not taken, the dreams that never materialized. "Do you ever wonder," Catherine asked one evening, "what our lives would have been like if we hadn't had that argument, if we'd stayed close all these years?" "All the time," I admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it too much. We can't change the past. We can only make the most of whatever future we have left." "You're right," Catherine said, "and I'm determined to make the most of it. I don't want to waste another day." Before Catherine left to go back to Austin after New Year's, we made plans. Real, concrete plans. She'd come visit once a month, staying for a few days each time. I'd go visit her in Austin too, see her home, meet her friends, get to know her world. We'd talk on the phone at least 3 times a week. We'd spend holidays together again, alternating whose house we'd celebrate at. "I've been thinking," Catherine said on her last night at my house, "about something you said in your letter, about not wanting to waste another single day." "Yeah?" I said. "I don't want to live 5 hours apart anymore," Catherine said. "I know it's a big decision, and I don't have to make it right now, but I've been thinking about moving back to San Antonio. There's nothing really keeping me in Austin. Jennifer lives in Dallas. Most of my old friends have moved or passed away. But here I'd have you, and that feels like enough." My heart leaped. "Are you serious? You'd really consider moving back?" "More than consider," Catherine said. "I think I want to. I think I've spent too many years living away from the person who matters most to me. I don't want to do that anymore." We talked about it for hours. The logistics, the timeline, whether she'd rent or buy, what neighborhood she might like. By the time we said goodnight, Catherine had decided she'd start looking at properties in San Antonio within the next month, with a goal of moving by spring. We'll have lost 32 years, Catherine said, hugging me goodbye the next morning before she got in her car to drive back to Austin. But maybe we can make up for it by spending whatever time we have left being actual sisters again. I'd like that, I said, holding her tight. I'd like that more than anything. Catherine kept her word. She came to visit every month, and each visit felt like a gift, a miracle I still couldn't quite believe was real. In March of 2025, she bought a small house in Terrell Hills, back in the neighborhood where she'd lived with Robert decades ago. By April, she'd moved in, and suddenly my sister lived 15 minutes away again instead of 5 hours. We saw each other at least 3 times a week, sometimes more. We'd meet for lunch, go grocery shopping together, attend church together the way we used to. We joined a book club together, started taking a watercolor painting class that Catherine had always wanted to try. We became fixtures in each other's lives again, the separation healing slowly but steadily. Our families reconnected too. Michael and David started including their Aunt Catherine in family gatherings again. Jennifer came to visit her mom in San Antonio and would join us for dinner. Catherine's grandchildren, Matthew and Sophie, came for a week in the summer, and I got to meet them and spoil them the way an aunt should. It wasn't always perfect. Sometimes old hurts would surface, old patterns of communication that weren't healthy. Sometimes we'd start to argue and have to stop ourselves, remind ourselves that we weren't willing to lose each other again over whatever small disagreement had come up. We had to learn how to be sisters again, had to figure out how our relationship worked now that we were older, had lived separate lives for so long. But we were committed to it. We both knew what we'd lost, and we weren't willing to lose it again. This past fall on Thanksgiving, we gathered at my house, Michael and his family, David and his family, Jennifer and her family, Catherine and me. It was chaotic and loud and wonderful. As we sat around the table saying what we were grateful for, I watched Catherine across from me, laughing at something one of the grandchildren said, and I felt such overwhelming gratitude I could barely speak when my turn came. I'm grateful, I finally managed to say, for second chances, for grace, for family, and especially for having my sister back. Catherine's eyes met mine across the table, and she smiled, that warm, familiar smile I'd loved my whole life and had gone without for 32 years. Me too, she said softly. Me too. Orchestrated final section with structured elements and engagement strategy. I've reached the end of section 8. I need to now write section 9, the motivational closing, which should be 300 words. This is the final section where Eleanor reflects on the journey, shares lessons learned, and provides an inspirational message for others. This also needs to include the final CTA. Let me make sure to hit all the mandatory elements. Reflection on personal journey, 350 words. Specific lessons learned, 350 words inspirational message for other women, 350 words. It's never too late to action relevant to the story, 150 words strong final call to action, 150 words affectionate farewell, 150 words tolik biking toil, 500 words target, a bit above the range but within the 8% tolerance. I also need to include the third and final engagement reminder here, the final CTA asking for likes, subscriptions, and comments. Let me make sure it's unique to this story and reflects its message about reconciliation and second chances. I'm sitting here now on a December evening in 2025, looking at that chair beside my Christmas tree, the one that's not empty anymore, hasn't been empty for 2 Christmases now. Catherine is sitting in it, working on her watercolor painting while I write this story. Both of us comfortable in that companionable silence that only comes from a lifetime of knowing each other. We're 78 and 75 now. We don't know how many more Christmases we'll have together, how many more years we'll get to be sisters in more than just name. But we're determined to make the most of every single day we have left. When I think about the 32 years we lost, I feel a deep sadness. I think about all the moments we should have shared, births and deaths, celebrations and sorrows, ordinary Tuesday afternoons that become precious when you realize how finite they are. I think about how Mama died without seeing her daughters reconciled, how Thomas never got to see me heal this wound, how Catherine's husband passed away without me being there to support her through that loss. But I also try not to dwell too much in regret. Regret doesn't change the past. It only steals from the present. So instead, I try to focus on gratitude. Gratitude that we found our way back to each other before it was too late. Gratitude for every day we have together now. Gratitude for the courage Catherine showed in writing that letter and breaking our terrible silence. Looking back on everything that happened, the argument, the decades of estrangement, the reconciliation. I've learned some important lessons that I want to share with anyone who might be listening, anyone who might be in a similar situation of broken relationships and years of silence. First, pride is the most expensive thing you can own. It costs you relationships, experiences, joy, love. That day at Thanksgiving in 1992, I chose my pride over my sister. I chose being right over being connected. I let my need to prove I was the better daughter destroy the relationship that had been the foundation of my entire life. And I paid for that pride with 32 years of loneliness, of missing the person who knew me best, of going through life without the one person who'd been there since the beginning. Second, there's no such thing as the perfect time to reconcile. I spent years thinking that I'd reach out to Catherine someday, when the hurt wasn't so fresh, when enough time had passed, when I felt ready. But that day never came on its own. I had to make it come, or rather Catherine had to be brave enough to make it come. If she'd waited for the perfect time, she'd still be waiting. If you're waiting for the perfect time to heal a broken relationship, stop waiting. The perfect time is now, while you both still have now. Third, forgiveness isn't about forgetting or pretending the hurt never happened. Catherine and I haven't forgotten what we said to each other that day. We haven't erased the fact that we both failed each other, that we both let anger and resentment poison what should have been unconditional love. But we've chosen to forgive anyway, to let go of our death grip on the past, so we can have open hands to hold each other in the present. Forgiveness is a choice you make every day, not a feeling that magically appears and makes everything okay. Fourth, it's never too late to say you're sorry. I thought it was too late for Catherine and me. 32 years felt like an impossible distance to cross, a chasm too wide to bridge. But Catherine's letter proved me wrong. Her courage in reaching out, in admitting fault, in asking for a second chance, showed me that it's never too late, as long as you're both still alive, still breathing, still capable of choosing love over pride. And finally, and this is perhaps the most important lesson, time is not infinite. We act like we have forever to fix our broken relationships, to reach out to the people we've hurt or who've hurt us, to heal the wounds we've been nursing for years or decades. But we don't have forever. Mama died without seeing her daughters reconcile. Thomas died without seeing me heal this rift. Robert passed away, while Catherine and I were still estranged. Every day you wait is a day you'll never get back. A day that could have been filled with connection and love, but was instead filled with stubborn silence. If you're listening to this, and you have someone in your life you haven't spoken to, a sister or brother, a parent or child, a friend who was once close, but now feels like a stranger, I want to ask you something. What are you waiting for? What perfect circumstance do you think needs to happen before you can pick up the phone, write that letter, send that text message? Because here's what I learned. That perfect circumstance doesn't exist. You'll never feel completely ready. The hurt will never fully fade on its own. The fear of rejection will never completely disappear. But you have to do it anyway. You have to be brave anyway. You have to choose connection over comfort, vulnerability over pride, hope over fear. Yes, they might reject you. Yes, it might be awkward or painful or complicated. Yes, you might discover that the relationship can't be fully restored to what it once was. But I promise you, trying and failing is better than never trying at all. Because if you never try, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering, what if? And when they're gone, when it truly is too late, you'll have to live with the knowledge that you had the chance to reach out and you didn't take it. It's never too late to rebuild what pride destroyed. It's never too late to choose love over being right. It's never too late to admit you were wrong, to ask for forgiveness, to extend grace. Catherine and I are living proof of that. We lost 32 years, but we found each other again. We can't get those years back, but we can make the most of whatever time we have left. If you've made it this far in my story, if you've been moved by what Catherine and I went through and what we found on the other side of our reconciliation, I want to ask for your support one more time. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly does help this channel reach more people who might need to hear this message about second chances and reconciliation. If you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so and turning on notifications so you won't miss future stories. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you thought of Catherine's and my journey, or share where you're watching from. Every like, every subscription, every comment helps this channel grow and helps these real stories of hope and healing reach the people who need them most. Thank you so much for being part of this community and for listening with your heart. I don't know how much longer Catherine and I will have together. We're both in our late 70s now, dealing with the aches and pains and limitations that come with age. But however many years, months, or days we have left, we're spending them as sisters again. We're spending them with love and forgiveness and gratitude instead of anger and resentment and pride. That chair beside my Christmas tree isn't empty anymore. My phone rings regularly with Catherine's voice on the other end. My calendar has her name written on it multiple times a week. My life is full again in a way it hasn't been since 1992. And if an old, stubborn woman like me can find the courage to heal a 32-year-old wound, if Catherine and I can find our way back to each other after more than 3 decades of silence, then anyone can. It's never too late. As long as you're both still here, as long as you're both still breathing, there's hope. Don't wait as long as we did. Don't waste decades that you could be spending with the people you love. Life is too short, and the people we love are too precious to let pride and stubbornness steal them away. Reach out. Make the call. Write the letter. Take the risk. Choose love. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives someone out there the courage to heal their own broken relationship, to reach out to their own estranged sister, or brother, or parent, or friend. May your holidays be filled with love, forgiveness, and second chances. And may you never have an empty chair beside your Christmas tree. With all my love, Eleanor.